It's no secret that fighting games are perceived as some of the most challenging and unintuitive games for a beginner to learn. The level of practice and research needed to be even competent makes the genre incredibly intimidating for the average player.
Why don't you like fighting games?
It's probably like the one type of video game that I've just never enjoyed playing. Like,
Why is that?
I think because like the difficulty curve is insanely high, and I feel that like I don't want to sit there and have to research combos. Whereas in a game like, I don't know, like a first-person shooter, it's so intuitive that like...
Because it's just one button.
Yeah, it's literally just point and click, right? And like, yeah, it is very... anyone can figure it out.
Yeah.
To remedy what he perceived as a major barrier in the genre, game designer Masahiro Sakurai set out to make the anti-fighting game. Super Smash Bros. Was created to remove the execution barrier seen in most traditional 2D fighters. In many ways, Sakurai succeeded, with Super Smash Bros. Becoming a commercial powerhouse to casual gamers everywhere. But in the ultimate irony, his second Smash title, Melee, would reveal itself over time to be one of the most technically demanding and mentally difficult competitive fighting games of all time. So what is it about the seemingly innocuous video game featuring Nintendo characters that has made it one of the most infamous esports to master? The answer lies in the combination of many factors, some of which are baked into the gameplay engine itself, while others come from the unique environment created by a competitive video game that is still actively played 25 years after its release. Fighting game thought leader Patrick Miller defines fighting games as two players colliding in a collection of tests against each other. You can think of it as a fast-moving game of chess. Players are constantly in situations where they need to either think through how to get the upper hand or get themselves out of a disadvantaged situation. The more skilled player who can win enough interactions or tests will eventually come out on top. So what skills are fighting games actually testing? There are three core pillars that most players have categorized as vital to fighting game success. They've been called many different things by different people, but Patrick Miller defines them as knowledge, dexterity, and empathy. Knowledge refers to a player's understanding of the game's mechanics, characters, and the different options they have at any given moment. Dexterity is a player's ability to translate what they want their character to do into the correctly timed inputs on a controller. And empathy is the ability to not just play the game, but play the player, and gauge an understanding of the human competitor on the other side. Different fighting games can skew towards different skills. A game like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 leans heavily on knowledge and dexterity, as it rewards players who take the time to learn all the intricate combo routes. In concept, Smash was designed to do the opposite. Smash's two-button input system simplifies the more complex motion inputs seen in traditional fighting games. In theory, this should reduce the amount of knowledge and dexterity needed for a player to be successful. But in practice, this isn't necessarily the case. Smash's nature as a platform fighter translates complex inputs into an emphasis on dynamic movement.
Okay, see, that's what I was expecting. That's what I was expecting.
While traditional 2D fighters may require quarter circles for special moves, many also contain more rigid and stiff actions. Smash trades memorized combo sequences for the constant need to be platforming. You're either navigating the stage for positioning or chasing an opponent down to attack. So how fast you need to be moving to keep up. Many games measure speed by actions per minute, or APM, which is essentially how many button sequences you need to be inputting on your controller. In a video by Beefy Smash Doods, they track the number of inputs performed in a single 3-minute game of Melee by former top player Armada during a high-stakes tournament set. The end result was slightly over 700 inputs, which averages out to about 250 inputs a minute. But this is averaged out over an entire game. In burst moments, it can spike even higher. In a different video tracking inputs over a single combo sequence, PPMD would be clocked at hitting 38 inputs in about 5 seconds, which works out to around 7.6 inputs a second. Yet, these inputs don't come down to pure button mashing. Each one needs to be both meaningful and precise. This is where knowledge and dexterity overlap, and it's also where Melee's engine lends itself to be incredibly punishing. In platformers, there's a commonly implemented mechanic known as coyote time. When a player falls off a ledge, game designers will typically add a small window where the player can still jump despite being airborne. The idea here is to offer a player a sense of leniency and relieve them of the burden from having to be pixel perfect in their timings. The equivalent mechanic in fighting games is what's known as an input buffer. This is a queue in the background that is continually tracking all the button inputs a player has pressed. This buffer allows game designers the ability to track the player's next intention. Even if a user inputs slightly early when their character shouldn't be actionable, the designer can grant a bit of leniency and load up their desired output anyways. This feature is common among many modern fighting games, including the later Smash titles from Brawl and onward. But Melee has no universal buffer system. There's only a handful of cases where you can enter an action early and still get a result. What this means is that execution needs to be precise down to the exact moment that an animation ends. An animation is made up of small parts called a frame. Melee runs at 60 frames per second, meaning that every 1/60th of a second, the game is able to transition from the current frame to the next. If you want to input from your controller to register as early as possible, this gives you a tiny window of 16.67 milliseconds to do it. In casual play, this isn't a huge issue, as most actions don't need to be performed within frames of one another, but competitive play is filled with situations where one frame can be the difference between winning and losing. The matchup of Marth vs Jigglypuff is a great example. Marth's long and fast grab is considered one of his best assets, but it's tested against Jigglypuff, who can answer back by crouching under the grab and punishing with an explosive rest that deletes a stock instantly. Since a single grab against Jigglypuff often results in some damage and positioning, the skewed risk-reward ratio disincentivizes Marth from using one of his best tools. That is, at least, unless a Marth player has mastered the technique of a pivot. When a melee character dashes, they enter the dash state and cannot perform any attack other than a fairly linear dash attack until they change into a different state. But while dashing the other way, there's a singular frame where a character is actually actionable and can toss out any attack of their choosing. If Marth lands a grab on Jigglypuff, it just so happens that he can toss them, chase them down, and land a pivot forward smash that aligns with the tipper end of his sword. Done correctly, it can steal a Puff stock absurdly early. This can completely shift the matchup, as Marth's grab becomes a much more threatening option, but with the window to perform a pivot being a single frame, it requires a ton of dedicated practice to pull off consistently. The mechanic of a ledge dash is another great example of Melee's required precision. When a player grabs the ledge, they are expected to be in a disadvantaged state, as their character is stuck with only a few very linear options to get them back onto the stage. To prevent the ledge from being a complete death zone, the designers granted characters a few moments of invulnerability where they are safe from the opponent and can have some time to make a decision of how they want to attempt to make it back. But this invulnerability can be abused. If done fast enough, many characters can let go, jump, and air dodge onto the stage, carrying some invulnerability frames along the way. The more precise the motion, the more invulnerability frames you'll carry onto the stage. Do it right and you can make it back safely, or even completely reverse the tides of a bad situation. But do it too slowly and you can find yourself in the hands of your opponent. Or even worse, doing it too fast will result in an air dodge off the stage, which will cause you to lose your stock entirely. Self-destructs are a feature that are particularly unique to platform fighters. A game like Street Fighter doesn't typically zap a player's health bar for messing up a Shoryuken. It's up to the opponent to be able to capitalize on the situation. But in Melee, it's quite common to see even the best players tossing their own stocks away after failing to do an option. High-risk, high-reward situations like this are everywhere in Melee, and this is because most advanced techniques were never intended by the designers. Instead, they are quirks or exploits of the game engine. Watching high-level Melee is actually not too different from watching someone speedrun their way through a game by utilizing a bunch of tricks. In a way, you could argue that some of these mechanics are actually going against how the game is attempting to function, hence why they can be so hard to pull off. This also has a very unique effect on how knowledge is understood in Melee. Because the game was never designed to play the way that competitors do, knowledge in Melee is almost completely player-driven. While other games may come bundled with tutorials, combo lists, and other methods to get a player up to speed, resources to learn competitive Melee have historically always lived outside the game itself. Over the years, the community has come together and dissected the game and created resources for players to learn and improve. With how well put together many of today's improvement tools are, a player just starting out today has a massive advantage to learn the minutiae of Melee faster than players in the past ever could. You could argue that with complete knowledge at their disposal, a dedicated new Melee player today has a massive head start. But this isn't necessarily the case. Knowledge and dexterity on their own aren't enough. Succeeding in Melee requires that you recognize that there's a human player on the other side. And this is where Melee gets interesting. One aspect of Melee that is commonly cited as a more beginner-friendly aspect of the game is its relatively small cast of viable characters. Unlike later Smash titles where the viable rosters can explode, Melee's relevant cast is quite small. Being incredibly generous, about half of Melee's roster is considered to be tournament viable, but for the average tournament, an overwhelming majority of the player base will only utilize about 6 or 7 characters. On paper, this means that the average tournament player only needs to study and be prepared for a handful of characters, lowering the amount of knowledge necessary to succeed. But Melee matchups go past memorizing frame data and strategies. The reality is that characters in Melee are so expressive that the same character can be piloted in many unique playstyles. You can compare the approach of Captain Falcon players Wizrobe and Nun. Wizrobe is an incredibly precise Falcon who likes to combine his fast reaction times and Falcon's top speed with clear combo flowcharts and a strong understanding of Melee's defensive mechanics. On the contrary, Nun aims for a more loose style, opting for movement, unconventional combo options, and hard reads to try to get in the head of his opponent and make them second guess themselves. Both styles are incredibly effective and come with their own strengths and weaknesses. If you were to face off against these players, knowing everything about the Captain Falcon matchup would definitely help, but that alone doesn't guarantee you a win. You need to go into the match with a game plan of the person on the other side. To make it even more complex, the best players can switch up their playstyles mid-game, and even borrow ideas from other competitors. In a tournament setting where outcomes can vary greatly, you can't count on a solidified bracket path, and have to be ready to take on any competitor. Speaking of competitors, Melee's player base is another particularly punishing aspect of the game. There's a game design concept that's referred to as the skill floor and the skill ceiling. The skill ceiling refers to absolute mastery of a game. This is your theoretical perfect play that would be seen in something like a TAS or coined by mantras like 20xx. On the other hand, the skill floor refers to the minimum amount of skill required to be able to play the game with confidence. Smash is typically touted as a game with a low skill floor, as the simplified input system makes it easy to pick up and play, but Tournament Melee is a completely different story. Since it is a competitive game against human opponents, the skill floor isn't static. Instead, it's relative to the skill of the rest of the player base. And while many know Melee is a game with an incredibly high skill ceiling, one of the underappreciated aspects of the game is its unusually high skill floor, which is a direct result of the niche player base that stuck with the game for almost 25 years. The life cycle of a competitive game usually begins with a mass influx of players. While some will be better than others, everyone is initially figuring the game out together. As players invest more time into a title, a portion of enthusiasts will continue to play and improve, while others will lose interest and move on. The result is that over time, both the skill floor and the skill ceiling will rise. For game designers looking to sell their game to the widest net possible, this can be seen as an accessibility issue. To remedy this, modern games will typically have new features, characters, or even balance patches to shake things up, and try to encourage new and lower skilled players to flow back into the game. After some time, a developer may even release a new title that changes some of the fundamental mechanics, which can help even the playing field between veterans and newer players. Modern controls in Street Fighter 6 is a great example, as the simplified control scheme allows players who've never played Street Fighter to be able to utilize special moves and catch up without having to practice traditional motion inputs. But Melee is a game that's nearing its 25th anniversary, a timeline much longer than the typical competitive video game. Being released in 2001 for the GameCube, it is completely static in terms of development. The closest thing to a patch in Melee is the occasional rule set change agreed to by the community. If you played in Melee tournaments during the early 2000s, you could probably do okay without knowing what a wave dash is, but nowadays, the competitive landscape for Melee is drastically different. Although there have been periods where Melee sees an influx of players due to some external events, the core player base mainly consists of die-hard fans who have been playing the game for years. So while you can learn faster than ever before, the trade-off is that the level of skill necessary to compete has been steadily rising for the past 2 decades. Even something as simple as taking a set or two at a local tournament can be seen as a huge milestone due to how skewed the skill level actually is.
It's hard for everyone. It's not easier for Puff or for Falco or for Fox. It's all hard to win tournaments. So just get better. Wanted to get better. Is that it?
Like any difficult game, Melee is going to require time investment and effort if you hope to compete. But there's plenty of really great hard games in existence. Between difficult single-player games, speedruns, other fighting games, and even other Smash titles, there's plenty of other options for someone to play. So if you're looking for a challenge, why not focus your efforts on perfecting these games instead? This is because despite Melee's reputation for being hard, that's never really been the selling point. People turn to Melee because it's fun. The game engine, whether intentional or not, creates an incredibly expressive and dynamic system that feels incredible to play. Landing a Melee combo hits the same note as landing a trick in skateboarding. It's fast, flashy, and impressive to onlookers even if they don't fully understand what they just witnessed. There's no denying that the learning curve is steep, but stick with it and Melee will provide you with a unique experience that only a fighting game can. Your own competitive journey.
At the end of the day, Aiden and I are Melee players, and what that means is that nothing else fucking hits quite the same. This is a sentiment often shared by people who grind the game, is that Melee like kind of fucks up your perception of video games, at least single player experiences, because it's like the ultimate like fucking rush. And it's hard for a single player game to kind of meet that because you can ultimately beat it.
Unlike a genre like RPGs, there's no EXP bar that you can endlessly fill. Growth is non-linear and happens entirely within you and your ability to get better at taking on the tests that Melee throws at you. Everyone has their own pace of improvement, and while it can be frustrating at times, there's no better feeling than having a moment where everything clicks or accomplishing a milestone that you set for yourself. And while you might run into the occasional jerk, most fellow players will be incredibly encouraging. Many of them have been on the same path themselves and want nothing more than new players to join them on that journey and experience the same thrill they felt when challenging themselves in Melee. That's the reason there's still thousands of people filling out convention centers to congregate and play. And if Melee's new generation proves anything, it's that attempting to learn Melee is far from a hopeless task. Some of Melee's best players today weren't even alive to see the release of the game itself, yet still found themselves compelled enough to give it their attention. Melee will absolutely challenge you, but nothing good ever comes easy. And if you hang on for the ride, the game will reward you in ways few other video games can.